What if the story of human civilization didn't begin where we were told it did? What if some of the greatest achievements of the ancient world weren't miracles, but leftovers from something we no longer remember? Across the planet, there are places that shouldn't exist. Stones cut with impossible precision, temples older than farming itself, cities hidden beneath oceans, and structures so advanced they still confuse modern engineers. These aren't myths. They're real. They're measured, excavated, and standing quietly in the open. And the unsettling part isn't that we don't have answers. It's that the answers we do have don't fully work. Because every time we think we've mapped the beginning of civilization, the past pushes back, revealing gaps, contradictions, and whispers of knowledge that arrived far earlier than it should have. Tonight, we step into those gaps and listen to what history isn't saying.
In the quiet stillness of the night, when the world softens and familiar thoughts begin to fade into gentle shadows, the past feels strangely alive. It rises slowly, like mist over a sleeping landscape, bringing with it an air of mystery that doesn't always appear in the bright certainty of daytime. History, usually presented to us as a clean, orderly timeline, begins to loosen around the edges. The stories we have memorized and the versions of events we were taught start to feel less fixed, less rigid. In this softened darkness, history feels less like a straight line and more like a vast ocean, deep, uncharted, and full of forgotten currents. It is in these hours that certain ancient mysteries come forward with greater clarity. They are the anomalies that archaeologists have brushed dust off with surprise, the structures that engineers look at with confusion, the artifacts that historians can't quite place on their carefully drawn timelines. They exist quietly, stubbornly, like pieces of a puzzle that simply refuse to fit. They should not exist, not according to what we think we know, yet they are undeniably real. Their presence in our world suggests that something in the story of human history is missing, or perhaps hidden, or maybe simply misunderstood. Tonight, we wander softly through these mysteries. We move like travelers drifting through old ruins under moonlight. Not rushing, not forcing conclusions, simply observing the quiet defiance of the past. The anomalies we will explore are not imagined. They are not myths or exaggerations. They are real places, real objects, real patterns etched into stone, metal, and memory. Each carries a whisper of something forgotten, something that doesn't quite match the narrative we have built about our ancestors. Picture a stone cut so precisely that even with today's advanced tools, replicating it would require meticulous effort. Imagine lifting a block weighing hundreds of tons without cranes, engines, or steel cables. Yet ancient builders somehow did. Visualize a temple standing long before agriculture was thought to exist, crafted with a level of intention and symbolism that suggests a society far more complex than the textbooks describe. Think of underwater staircases carved with geometric precision, or rusted fragments of ancient machines whose gears were crafted with mathematical understanding that should not have existed for another 1,000 years. These are not simply wonders, they are contradictions. And contradictions are the most interesting parts of any story. As we journey deeper, we allow ourselves to release the need for clear answers. Certainty has its place, but tonight is not about proof. It is about possibility, about the quiet humility that comes from recognizing how much we don't yet know. Every civilization in history believed it understood the world. Yet time and again, we uncover things that challenge those old beliefs. And today, we find ourselves in the same cycle, confidently outlining the story of humanity while the earth still hides chapters we haven't read. There is a calming quality in accepting this. Instead of viewing these mysteries as threats to established knowledge, we can let them become invitations, gentle reminders that discovery is an ongoing story. The earth is vast, time is long, and our understanding is constantly evolving. What we call the beginning of civilization may simply be the earliest page that survived. What we call primitive may be a fragment of something once far more complex. And what we call impossible may only appear so because we have forgotten the methods used to achieve it. In this softened, nighttime frame of mind, we can walk through history with curiosity instead of judgment. We can imagine ancient hands carving perfect angles in stone without needing to label them with certainty. We can envision lost cities drowned beneath oceans without needing to decide whether they were built by forgotten cultures or shaped by the earth itself. We can examine star-aligned monuments without searching desperately for a single explanation. The unknown becomes a space to breathe, not a problem to solve. Perhaps this is why these ancient mysteries are so captivating at night. They mirror the quiet uncertainty of the world around us. The dim light, the softened shapes, the gentle blur between what is real and what is possible. The night is a reminder that clarity is not always necessary. Sometimes it is enough to simply witness. As we settle more deeply into this journey, imagine walking through a vast ancient library. The air is cool, carrying the scent of old paper and forgotten stories. Lantern light flickers over shelves filled with manuscripts whose edges crumble at a touch. You run your fingers lightly over bindings written in languages long faded from memory. Some pages are missing, others are torn. Here and there, you find entire sections of the library swallowed by dust or time. And every so often, you come across a book that shouldn't exist, a chapter written in a style far ahead of its time, or a story that contradicts all the others. That is what these anomalies feel like, out-of-place chapters in the great library of human history. As we turn the first page of this exploration, we prepare to step into the places where these impossible chapters still sit. In silent valleys, under shifting sands, beneath ocean waves, and atop forgotten mountains, they wait. They do not shout. They do not demand attention. They simply remain untouched by the march of time. And so, gently, patiently, we begin our journey with one of the most striking examples. High in the Peruvian Andes, where colossal stones rest in impossible harmony, challenging everything we believe about the limits of ancient engineering. High in the Peruvian Andes, where the thin mountain air carries an ancient stillness, lies a place that continues to confuse engineers, archaeologists, and historians alike. As dawn touches the horizon, Sacsayhuaman emerges from the landscape like a dream carved into stone. Its walls, dark and weathered, seem almost alive, patient observers of centuries of unanswered questions. From a distance, they appear simple, like any old ruin. But as you step closer, the illusion dissolves. These stones are not ordinary. They are enormous, towering blocks, some as large as small houses, fitted together so precisely that even a single sheet of paper cannot slide between them. Their surfaces are polished smooth, their edges sharp, their contours curved and interlocking like pieces of a giant stone puzzle. Standing before them, the first sensation is disbelief. Your eyes tell you these stones are real, yet your mind struggles to comprehend how they could have possibly been shaped, moved, and placed by a civilization with no known machines to lift such weight. The smallest stones here weigh several tons, and the largest are estimated at over 100 tons. Even with modern cranes and equipment, moving blocks of this scale would be a logistical feat requiring careful planning and immense resources. And yet, the builders of Sacsayhuaman achieved it thousands of years ago, using methods we cannot fully reconstruct today. The Incas, often credited with constructing these walls, were master builders in their own right. They possessed a deep understanding of stone, geometry, and seismic engineering. Their techniques allowed them to build structures that have endured earthquakes capable of flattening modern buildings. Still, Sacsayhuaman feels like a mystery even within the context of Incan ingenuity. Some of the stones appear to have been softened, molded, or shaped with an ease that defies explanation. Others show signs of multi-angled cuts, a level of precision unmatched in most ancient architecture. These are not random placements or rough fits. Every block seems to have been considered individually, shaped according to an invisible plan, then set perfectly into the next. Each stone has a unique shape, almost like a living puzzle piece that fits nowhere else. Walking along these walls, you notice something else. There is no mortar, The stones are not held together by any binding material. Instead, they rest against each other, their weight and design keeping them locked in place even during powerful earthquakes. It is a technique so effective that the structures have survived centuries of seismic activity that destroyed more recent buildings around them. The stones do not move. They do not shift. They simply exist, quietly defying the forces of nature. The question that arises naturally is simple. How? The conventional explanation is that the Incas, with remarkable skill and coordinated labor, used stone hammers, wooden levers, and a vast workforce to chip, shape, and move these blocks. And it is true, the Incas did shape stone tirelessly, often using repetitive pounding to gradually sculpt surfaces. But even with these methods in mind, the sheer size and complexity of Sacsayhuaman pushed the limits of credibility. How did they grind these stones into such perfectly matching shapes without the wheel, without iron tools, and without written plans? How did they transport the heaviest blocks across uneven mountain terrain, up steep slopes, and into their final positions? And why does this site surpass the craftsmanship of many other Incan structures, as if it belonged either to an earlier, more advanced phase of their culture, or perhaps to someone else entirely? Standing there, the stones seem to hold their own secrets. Even in daylight, they appear slightly unreal, as if shaped by hands with knowledge lost to us. At night, when moonlight spills across their surfaces, the effect is even more striking. The shadows create patterns that amplify the sense of purpose behind every contour. The silence of the highlands surrounds you, and the presence of the stones feels alive, ancient, and watchful. Some believe Sacsayhuaman predates the Incas. Oral legends from the region tell of an earlier people with remarkable capabilities, giant builders, divine craftsmen, or civilizations long forgotten. While such stories drift into the realm of myth, they also highlight something important. The people who live near these walls have always sensed their unusual nature. To them, this place has never been ordinary. Its construction has never been simple. It has always carried an air of impossibility. But mystery does not only lie in how the stones were shaped. There is also the question of why. Sacsayhuaman was part of Cusco, the Incan capital, a city designed with symbolic and cosmological precision. Some scholars believe the fortress played ceremonial roles, not just defensive ones. When you walk through its zigzagging walls, you feel something beyond military intention. The design seems to follow patterns inspired by the heavens, echoing the shape of lightning bolts or the course of energy through sacred landscapes. Perhaps the construction was meant to reflect the balance between earth and sky. Perhaps it was built to resonate with the natural world in ways we no longer measure or remember. The deeper you wander into Sacsayhuaman, the more the site transforms. It shifts from a physical structure into an enigma. Every curve, every stone, every angle raises more questions than answers. You may try to focus on the explanations offered by archaeology, but the gaps are noticeable. The theories feel incomplete, like pieces from a different puzzle. And that is the beauty of this place. It does not demand that you accept one story or another. It simply stands massive, silent, and undeniably real. Its walls remind you that the past does not always follow the rules we expect. Human history is not a straight line, but a landscape full of peaks and forgotten valleys. Sacsayhuaman may represent one such peak, a moment of extraordinary skill and understanding that later generations could not replicate or fully comprehend. As you step away from the fortress, the questions linger. How did they do it? What knowledge did they have that we lost? Why does this place look more like the work of advanced engineering than primitive chiseling? These questions do not close the story. Instead, they open the path to the next anomaly, another ancient site that challenges everything we think we know. High on the plains of Turkey, buried for reasons still unknown, lies a temple even older than Sacsayhuaman, a place where history itself bends. Far out on the rolling plains of southeastern Turkey, where the horizon stretches like an endless whisper, lies a place that quietly rewrote the story of human history. It sits atop a gentle hill, unassuming at first glance, covered for thousands of years in soil and silence. To the untrained eye, it could look like nothing more than a natural rise in the landscape. But beneath that hill sleeps one of the most extraordinary ancient constructions ever discovered. A temple complex so old, so carefully built, and so impossibly advanced for its time that it forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew about early humans. When archaeologists began digging here in the 1990s, they expected to find perhaps a forgotten village or a few scattered remnants from an early farming community. What they uncovered was something entirely different. Massive stone pillars, perfectly shaped and arranged in great circles, began emerging from the earth. These pillars weren't rough stones dragged into place. They were carved with precision, rising up to 20 feet tall, some weighing more than 10 tons. Their surfaces were decorated with detailed reliefs of animals: lions, snakes, cranes, scorpions, foxes, etched with an artistic skill rarely matched in ancient times. The more dirt that was removed, the stranger the discovery became. At first, researchers assumed this temple had been built around the time humans began settling into villages and practicing agriculture. But radiocarbon dating shattered that assumption. These pillars were not 5,000 years old, not 6,000, not even 8,000. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,600 BCE, more than 11,000 years ago. This means it predates not only Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, but also pottery, cities, written language, and organized agriculture. By all traditional accounts, nothing of this scale and sophistication should have existed at that time. Humans were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers then, moving across the plains, surviving day by day, with no ability or reason to build monolithic stone temples. Yet here it was undeniable, carved directly into the timeline like a bold contradiction. Walking through the site today, you can almost feel that contradiction in the air. The wind flows softly across the exposed pillars, stirring the dust in gentle spirals. The land around you is calm, bare, and open, giving no hint of the monumental effort that once took place here. It's difficult to reconcile the peaceful landscape with the reality of what lies beneath. These circular enclosures required coordination, planning, and cooperation on a massive scale. They required artistic vision, engineering knowledge, and a deep understanding of stone. And perhaps most mysteriously of all, they required a reason, a motivation strong enough to gather hundreds of people for years of labor, long before farming made large, stable communities possible. Some scholars believe Göbekli Tepe is the first temple in human history, the birthplace of organized religion. Others argue that it wasn't a temple at all, but a ceremonial gathering place, a social center, or perhaps a monument dedicated to ancestors or spirits. Whatever its purpose, the sheer sophistication of the site suggests that its builders were far more complex than we've assumed. They were not wandering bands of primitive people. They were thinkers, planners, artists, and engineers, operating with a level of cultural organization that should not have existed in their era. One of the most puzzling aspects of Göbekli Tepe is not just its age or its precision, but the fact that it was deliberately buried. Thousands of years after its construction, the people who used it, or perhaps their descendants, packed the enclosures with layers of earth, stones, and rubble. They sealed the entire complex, as if preserving it for another time, or as if intentionally removing it from their world. No one knows why. Was it ceremonial closure? Protection? A ritualized ending of an era? A cultural shift? The answer remains hidden, leaving Göbekli Tepe suspended between revelation and enigma. As you walk among the pillars, you notice that many of them resemble elongated human forms, with arms, hands, and belts carved into the stone. The pillars stand like silent guardians, almost as if they were watching over the site. In the soft glow of dawn or dusk, they seem to lean slightly inward, forming a circle of ancient sentinels. Their presence feels intentional, symbolic, maybe even spiritual. They look less like random stones and more like beings frozen in time. The carvings themselves are a language of their own. Animals appear in dynamic, almost animated poses, as though the artist wanted to capture the very essence of motion. Some scenes depict mythical combinations, creatures that may not have existed in the natural world. Others show abstract symbols whose meanings are lost to us. When you look at these carvings, you sense intelligence, imagination, and a worldview that we can only guess at. The deeper you absorb this place, the more the questions multiply. How did a pre-agricultural society gather enough people to construct such a monumental project? How were they fed if farming did not yet exist? How did they carve such large stones with simple tools? How do they transport them? And most intriguingly, what kind of beliefs or ideas compelled them to dedicate so much effort to building something on this scale? Göbekli Tepe challenges the long-accepted belief that religion arose after farming. Here, it seems the opposite may have occurred. Perhaps the desire for ritual, for meaning, for symbolic expression was strong enough to bring people together and inspire the kind of cooperation that eventually led to agriculture. This flips the story of civilization upside down. Instead of settled life giving rise to temples, temples may have given rise to settled life. At night, when one imagines the site illuminated by flickering firelight, the pillars cast long, dramatic shadows across the ground. The carvings would shift and come alive, the animals seeming to move as the flames danced. Perhaps rituals were held here under star-filled skies. Perhaps songs or chants echoed through the circles. Perhaps stories were told that have long since been swallowed by time. Whatever happened here, the echoes of those ancient moments remain. They linger in the stones, in the carvings, in the very arrangement of the pillars. Göbekli Tepe is a message from civilization we barely understand. A message that says, gently but clearly, that human history is deeper and far more mysterious than we once believed. As you leave the site, the image of those towering stones stays with you. They stand not only as relics of the past, but as reminders of how little we truly know. And as your footsteps fade from the dusty ground, another mystery awaits. An underwater world where ancient formations lie hidden beneath shifting currents, ready to challenge the timeline yet again. After witnessing the ancient precision carved into mountains and the astonishing temples buried beneath Turkish soil, the mind begins to drift into a quieter space where patterns start to reveal themselves. Not the loud, obvious patterns that textbooks celebrate, but gentler ones, subtle threads woven quietly across continents and eras. When you sit with these mysteries long enough, something begins to emerge between them, something delicate yet undeniable. It is the sense that history is not a series of isolated marvels scattered randomly across the map, but a tapestry, one whose edges we have barely begun to understand. In the soft glow of contemplation, it becomes clear that the anomalies we've encountered so far are not solitary enigmas. They share an underlying rhythm, a kind of ancient logic that modern explanations often struggle to capture. Stones cut too precisely, structures too old, designs too sophisticated, knowledge appearing where it wasn't supposed to be. Every site offers its own quiet defiance, but together they whisper a deeper message. It is in this transition between the known and unknown that your mind begins to settle, like dust floating down after centuries of stillness. You start to sense that the builders of these impossible places might have shared something, an understanding of the world, a relationship with the earth, or a way of seeing time that we no longer possess. Perhaps their genius was not a sudden burst of isolated brilliance, but part of a long, forgotten lineage of thought. A lineage that once connected humanity across distances greater than we imagined, carried not through roads or ships, but through shared insights, shared skies, shared dreams. When you breathe in the calmness of this realization, the mysteries no longer feel like separate puzzles. They begin to align, not in perfect clarity, but in a peaceful symmetry. You start to wonder whether ancient people around the world were guided by something deeper than survival, maybe by an instinct to create, to explore, to reach beyond themselves. Perhaps early humans were far more observant than we give them credit for. When your world is not drowned in noise, screens, or constant distraction, you notice things. The way shadows fall, the way stars move, the way stone vibrates beneath a chisel. Knowledge doesn't need technology when curiosity is strong enough. It becomes easy to imagine ancient craftsmen staring at the same night sky we see today, tracing invisible lines between constellations, measuring the movements of celestial bodies with nothing more than their eyes, patience, and a profound connection to nature. Across continents, people who never met one another looked upward and saw a story written in the stars. That story guided migrations, rituals, dreams, and decisions. Perhaps it also guided their architecture, shaping the way they built their temples, monuments, and ceremonial spaces. In this gentle moment between mysteries, the heart of the journey begins to settle into a deeper rhythm. It becomes less important to categorize history and more important to experience it, to let these ancient marvels wash over you like waves from a forgotten sea. The lines between fact and possibility blur slightly, not in confusion, but in wonder. You begin to understand that the purpose of exploring these mysteries is not to force answers, but to widen the space of curiosity. When you look back at Sacsayhuaman and Göbekli Tepe, the similarities become more compelling than the differences. Both sites required extraordinary skill. Both challenge our assumptions about what humans were capable of at their respective times. Both appear to have been built with intentions we can only guess at: ceremonial, artistic, spiritual, or something even more complex. And both sites suggest that early humans had the ability to organize themselves around grand visions long before conventional history allows for such sophistication. This realization doesn't provide certainty. Instead, it offers something more gentle, the comfort of mystery. The acknowledgement that our story is incomplete does not diminish us. It enriches us. It invites us to remain humble, to keep asking questions, to explore with open hearts rather than rigid expectations. As your thoughts drift deeper into this reflective space, the world grows quiet, and you begin to sense the presence of countless other forgotten places still sleeping under soil, sand, and ocean. The earth holds more secrets than we can imagine. Some are buried by natural forces, some by time, and some perhaps intentionally hidden by the people who built them. It is humbling to consider that the ground we walk on every day may be hiding entire chapters of human history that remain undiscovered simply because we haven't asked the right questions yet. This quiet pause between the mysteries is like standing at the center of a web of possibilities. You can feel connections stretching outward in all directions, toward ancient knowledge, lost technology, forgotten rituals, and cultural memories that may echo faintly across distant lands. You begin to suspect that the human story is not a straight path, but a spiral, looping through cycles of discovery, forgetting, and rediscovery. In this contemplative moment, you realize that the world is full of hidden symmetry. Mountains rise and fall, seas expand and retreat, civilizations bloom and fade. Knowledge emerges, disappears, and sometimes returns in new forms. The mysteries of the past are not isolated wonders struggling to be understood. They're markers, signposts pointing towards something we have not yet fully grasped. As you reflect on all this, the atmosphere of the journey shifts once more. Your curiosity gently awakens from this restful pause, ready to travel toward the next enigma. There's a natural pull, a quiet invitation calling you forward, guiding you from the dusty plains and buried temples to a place where the boundary between land and water dissolves into shimmering blue. Something waits beneath the waves, silent, sculpted, and ancient. And so the path leads onward, toward an underwater monument whose edges are carved with impossible precision, resting deep in the ocean currents of Japan. A place where the line between nature and human design becomes blurred, where stone steps descend into mystery, and where the sea holds secrets untouched for thousands of years. Far beneath the restless surface of the Pacific Ocean lies a landscape so strange, so sharply carved, that it challenges the quiet assumptions we hold about the ancient world. As you drift toward this next mystery, imagine the world falling momentarily silent, as if even the waves themselves are holding their breath. Below, where sunlight fades into a tranquil blue haze, an enormous stone structure rises from the seabed near the island of Yonaguni, Japan. Its lines are too clean, its angles too deliberate, and its geometry far too precise to ignore. Some describe it as a submerged city. Others insist that it is nothing more than a natural geological formation carved over time by the ocean's currents. But as you let your mind settle into this underwater realm, you start to sense the same quiet contradiction that hovered around the earlier mysteries. The feeling that something about this place simply does not fit the ordinary rhythms of nature. Descending through the filtered light, the structure slowly reveals itself. Tiered platforms arranged like vast staircases, terraces that stretch out in flawless horizontal layers, and monolithic walls with edges so straight they feel like the architecture of a forgotten civilization. As fish glide through the corridors of stone, you begin to see why this site has baffled explorers since its discovery. Nature is capable of extraordinary beauty, but it rarely shapes things with such symmetry, such intent, such almost mathematical precision. Yet there it stands, silent and unmoving, as if waiting for someone to remember the story it once belonged to. As you drift closer, the lines and surfaces become even more striking. Some ledges run perfectly parallel. Some corners meet in astonishing right angles. There are channels that look like passageways, steps that seem carved for human feet, and enormous blocks that appear to have been shaped and placed with purpose. And while the ocean has weathered every surface with soft strokes of erosion, the underlying order still radiates through. It's almost as though the sea is gently erasing something the world was never meant to forget. In the calming sway of the currents, your mind starts to wander through the possibilities. What if this structure once stood above sea level, long before rising waters claimed it? If so, who built it, and why? The official explanations point to tectonic activity and natural fracture patterns in sandstone. But when you look with your own imagination instead of strict expectation, you sense a different presence, an echo of hands that once shaped these terraces, steps, and platforms with patient skill. Perhaps long before recorded history, a culture lived here, guided by knowledge and purpose now lost to time. A people who observed the ocean, honored the land, and carved their identity into stone. A people whose memory dissolved as the sea rose, swallowing their achievements into quiet obscurity. The thought lingers, gentle yet insistent. But the opposite possibility is just as mesmerizing. That nature itself crafted this wonder, sculpting massive formations that just happen to resemble human architecture. If true, then the ocean becomes the artist, its currents chiseling out features so geometric that they appear intentional. This idea blurs the line between the natural and the engineered, pulling you into a space where certainty drifts away like sand carried by the tide. The site becomes even more mysterious when you realize how little we truly understand about ancient coastlines. Sea levels have shifted dramatically over the last 10,000 to 12,000 years. Entire landscapes that once held life, culture, and stories now rest quietly beneath the ocean. If Yonaguni is artificial, it would push human construction deep into a period when mainstream history tells us people were nomadic and technologically simple. It would suggest a knowledge of stonework far earlier than any currently accepted timeline. But even if it is natural, it still holds value beyond measure, because it reveals the stunning ways the earth can mimic intention, shaping forms that provoke curiosity and challenge the edges of our understanding. Hovering above the platform's highest terrace, you see how the descending layers create the illusion of a monumental staircase, leading down into darker waters. Each step looks like an invitation to explore deeper into a forgotten realm. With every passing moment, the atmosphere becomes dreamlike. It is easy to imagine divers centuries ago stumbling upon this place and believing they discovered the remains of a lost world, a sunken kingdom, or perhaps even a myth made real. And in the quiet between your breaths, the site begins to feel familiar somehow. It echoes the clean lines of Sacsayhuaman. It resonates with the ancient geometry of Göbekli Tepe. It shares the same impossible sense that someone long ago understood things we struggle to comprehend today. Even though Yanaguni lies beneath the sea and those sites rest on solid ground, the same thread of mystery winds through them all, binding them into a shared riddle. You realize that this structure, whether the creation of time or talent, sits at the crossroads of wonder. It gives nothing away easily. It whispers, but it never explains. And that is what makes it so compelling. Because mystery is often more powerful than certainty. Mystery sparks imagination, invites reflection, and gently pulls the mind away from rigid boundaries toward the softer landscapes of possibility. As the currents shift, your thoughts drift with them, settling into a peaceful acceptance that some questions do not need final answers. Some wonders exist, not to be solved, but to be felt. They remind us that the world is bigger than our assumptions and more beautiful than our explanations. Floating above the stone terraces, you sense the weight of thousands of years pressing down like layers of ocean pressure. And yet, the structure endures, unbroken, unapologetic, and eternal. It feels almost alive, breathing through the currents, glowing beneath the fractured sunlight, carrying secrets older than memory. You linger for a moment, letting its quiet presence surround you. And then, slowly, gently, the journey pulls you upward again, toward the surface, toward the open air, toward the next chapter in this unfolding tapestry of ancient enigmas. The waters of Yanaguni recede behind you, taking their secrets with them, but leaving you with a deeper sense of wonder. Ahead lies another mystery, one that rises not from the sea, but from the heart of ancient deserts and forgotten empires. A place where stone melts and flows as if shaped by impossible heat or unrecorded technology, where craftsmanship reaches a level that should not have existed at the time. A place waiting quietly under the sun, its walls whispering of a civilization lost in time. Across vast stretches of sand and stone, far from the whispering currents of Yanaguni, there is another place where history bends softly around a contradiction. It lies beneath scorching sunlight, surrounded by desert winds that have carried secrets for thousands of years. Here, the air grows still, and the ancient world seems to linger in a suspended breath. As you walk deeper into this arid landscape, strange structures begin to emerge. Walls fuse together, stones melted as if shaped not by patient hands, but by forces far beyond what conventional history allows. These ruins are unsettling in their beauty. Their surfaces are smooth in ways chisels cannot replicate, yet curved and warped as though once softened by an intense heat that should not have existed in the time they were formed. It is here, in this forgotten region, that archaeologists and explorers alike have paused with quiet disbelief. Some claim the structures look vitrified, their stones melted and fused together like glass. Others insist they are simply weathered by nature. But when you look closely, when you let your thoughts slow enough to absorb the quiet strangeness, the site feels like the aftermath of an event lost entirely to history. Imagine standing before a wall where two massive blocks appear to have flowed into one another, as though they were once liquid. Their edges curve, their junctions ripple slightly, as if frozen in a mid-melt. Traditional explanations struggle to account for this. Creating such effects today would require extreme temperatures, far beyond what any known ancient furnace or tool could produce. And yet here the evidence stands, stubbornly refusing to align with the familiar timeline of human development. The desert winds move softly across the stone, carrying grains of sand that whisper against the surface like distant memories. In this gentle quiet, it becomes easier to imagine an ancient civilization that mastered something unusual, perhaps a technique perhaps a technology, perhaps a natural process we no longer understand. The site does not need to reveal its truth. Its mystery is powerful enough without answers. As you step further through this melted landscape, the stones begin to form strange shapes. Archways fused into place, floors smoothed into a single continuous sheet, corners softened into curves as though sculpted by heat rather than hammered into shape. It feels less like walking through a ruin and more like wandering through the cooled remnants of a great fire, a fire so intense it reshaped the very bones of the buildings. Whatever happened here left behind a silence that stretches across centuries. And yet, despite the anomaly, there's an undeniable artistry to the structures. Even the melted surfaces carry an elegance, a quiet symmetry that hints at deliberate design. You can almost sense the presence of hands that once arranged these stones, guided by a purpose that has since dissolved into the dust. Perhaps the builders knew exactly what they were creating. Perhaps the melting was intentional, a technique for hardening or strengthening stone. Or perhaps it was accidental, the result of some unknown force that swept through the area long after the structures were built. In the heat of the desert afternoon, the stones shimmer under the sun, almost glowing with traces of their former transformation. This shimmering effect blurs the line between reality and imagination. The longer you stand there, the more the site begins to feel like a place touched by myth rather than history. Your mind drifts to ancient stories of divine fire, celestial weapons, or forgotten catastrophes, tales that might once have been metaphorical but now seem faintly plausible in the presence of these melted walls. Yet even in the calm mystery of this place, there's a grounding presence. The structures are real. Their textures are real. Their impossibility does not erase their existence. And so you find yourself caught gently between two worlds, the world of fact and the world of possibility. You start to recognize that history, as we know it, is merely a mosaic built from the fragments we have found. Countless pieces remain buried, broken, or erased by time. Perhaps this melted architecture is one of those pieces, one that challenges the entire picture when viewed in its full, strange clarity. As the sun begins to soften its light, the ruins take on a different mood. Shadows fall into the melted grooves, outlining the warped stone and revealing patterns unseen in the brightness of midday. The shapes become more pronounced, ripples where walls once stood straight, bulges where stone once lay flat. You can almost imagine the ancient heat still lingering, as if trapped within the rocks, waiting quietly to be noticed. And in this shifting light, the atmosphere grows contemplative. You begin to sense the weight of time pressing gently upon these ruins. Whatever happened here did not occur in a moment. It echoes across ages. It is an anomaly that has survived the rise and fall of empires, the passage of countless travelers, and the constant erosion of the desert winds. Yet it remains stubbornly unanswered, holding its secret with calm patience. The deeper you explore, the more profound the mystery becomes. This was not a tiny outpost or minor settlement. The scale suggests significance, ritual, cultural, or perhaps something entirely beyond our modern categories. Every melted surface hints at knowledge or events erased from memory. It becomes impossible not to wonder whether other such sites existed, long since destroyed or hidden beneath layers of forgotten history. As your footsteps echo softly through the quiet ruins, a thought settles into your mind with gentle certainty. The world is far older, far stranger, and far more intricate than the linear timeline we are taught. Human civilizations may have risen and fallen in cycles long before recorded history began. Knowledge may have been gained, lost, and rediscovered countless times. The melted ruins before you are not just relics. They are reminders of how much remains hidden. When the sky begins to shift toward evening, the desert cools, and a calm breeze sweeps through the strange formations. The mystery becomes even more profound in this softer darkness, where the melted stone seems to glow faintly under the fading sunlight. You take one last glance at the flowing curves of fused rock and feel an invitation to keep questioning, Keep imagining, keep exploring the places that history cannot fully explain. And just as the desert settles into night, the journey gently turns toward the next enigma, one rooted not in melted stone, but in impossible construction. A place where enormous blocks weighing more than modern cranes can lift are stacked with impossible precision, challenging every assumption about the capabilities of ancient builders. A place where the sheer scale of the architecture seems to mock the limitations we place on the past. There are moments in this journey when history seems to step aside, inviting you into a realm where human limits blur softly against impossible achievements. After leaving behind the melted stones of the desert, the next mystery rises like a silent giant, massive, immovable, and ancient beyond understanding. Here, the world feels heavier, not only with the weight of stone, but with the gravity of questions that have lingered for generations. You enter a landscape shaped by builders who left no names, no writings, no explanations, only enormous blocks of limestone and granite, cut so precisely that they fit together without mortar, as though guided by a technique that should not have existed at the time. Some of these stones weigh more than the largest machines of today can lift. Others are stacked at heights that challenge imagination. All of them sit in perfect alignment, resisting the wind, the rain, the slow erosion of centuries. They stand as if carved yesterday, yet their origins drift far beyond the edge of recorded memory. As you walk closer, the scale overwhelms you. One stone alone stretches for meters, weighing hundreds of tons, resting atop others with seamless ease. You run your hand along the edge, expecting roughness, but the surface is surprisingly smooth, as though polished by a craftsman with tools of extraordinary precision. The corners meet with such exactness that even a modern sheet of metal could not slip between the joints. Everything here feels intentional. Every cut, every angle, every placement. The silence around these monoliths is not empty. It carries a presence, a quiet awareness of the ancient hands that once shaped this place. No one knows how they managed to lift stones of such magnitude, let alone position them with this level of perfection. Modern engineers look on with disbelief. Archaeologists offer theories, but even the most accepted explanations feel incomplete. It is as if the stones themselves are politely refusing to reveal their secret. In the soft glow of the setting sun, shadows fall gently into the spaces between the megaliths, and the architecture begins to feel less like a structure and more like a riddle carved into the world. You cannot help but compare the scale to other mysteries you've encountered. Sacsayhuaman with its impossible precision, Yonaguni with its underwater geometry, the melted ruins shaped by unknown forces. Each site whispers of a mastery that defies simple categorization. Here, though, the mastery expresses itself through sheer magnitude, strength, confidence, a boldness that borders on the unbelievable. Some claim the ancient builders used rollers, ramps, and ropes, though even with these tools, the physics simply do not add up. Others insist that the civilization possessed lost knowledge, a forgotten understanding of balance, leverage, or vibration. A method so effective that stones weighing dozens of tons could be moved as effortlessly as wooden planks. And then there are the quieter theories, the ones spoken softly even by those who hesitate to stray from conventional timelines. Theories that imagine an era when humans were more advanced, more unified, or more skilled than our surviving records suggest. As you trace the lines of these giant blocks, a strange stillness settles in your chest. It is not the stillness of emptiness, but of wonder. It feels like standing at the edge of truth too large to grasp, one that humbles the modern mind. These megaliths remind us that intelligence does not always follow a linear path. Knowledge can rise and disappear like tides. Civilizations can reach extraordinary heights long before anyone writes their stories. Walking deeper between the towering stones, you begin to notice smaller details. Chiseling marks that should not exist in such ancient contexts, Pressure points where two massive blocks meet as delicately as puzzle pieces, grooves that suggest deliberate alignment with celestial bodies. This place was not built haphazardly. There was intention behind every placement. There was meaning behind every cut. And yet, whatever purpose guided the builders has slipped through history's fingers like drifting sand. Standing beneath the largest monoliths, you feel small in the presence of their enduring strength. The stones have watched empires rise and collapse. They have endured earthquakes, storms, and centuries of silence. Yet they remain unmoved, stubbornly anchored to the earth, as if resisting the slow march of time. It is remarkable to imagine that the people who built them lived lives filled with the same hopes, fears, and questions that we carry today. Their world, though separated from ours by thousands of years, pulses through these structures like a heartbeat preserved in stone. The longer you remain here, the more the air thickens with mystery. You begin to imagine the ancient site bustling with activity, workers coordinating in unison, leaders overseeing the placement of stones, craftsmen inspecting edges with unspoken expertise. Was this place a temple, a fortress, a ceremonial center, a message to future generations? The stones do not answer. They simply exist, offering their silence as a gentle invitation to wonder. As twilight deepens, the megaliths take on a different character. Their sharp edges soften. Their massive shadows elongate into the desert. The entire site feels like a sleeping giant, timeless, unwavering, untouched by the world's constant evolution. This moment creates a bridge between past and present, reminding you that humanity has always possessed an innate desire to build, to shape, to leave a mark that endures long after voices fade. And then, softly, a new realization enters your mind. These colossal stones may not stand alone in their mystery. Around the world, similar megalithic structures exist, each one challenging conventional history in its own quiet way. They form a network of enigmas stretching across continents, hinting at a shared thread of ancient knowledge, a thread that may have unraveled, leaving only these silent monuments behind. The stillness of the night settles in, wrapping the site in a hushed calm. The shadows deepen, the wind slows, and you find yourself stepping away, leaving behind the immovable giants that have guarded this landscape for ages. The path gently shifts toward yet another mystery, one where sound becomes the key, where geometry turns into resonance, and where ancient builders crafted monuments that hum with harmonic frequencies. Ahead lies a place where stone sings, where walls resonate, where the architects of antiquity understood something profound about the relationship between structure, sound, and spirit. A place that will open the next chapter in the long trail of impossibilities. There are places in the ancient world where stone seems to hold a voice, where architecture is not merely built to be seen, but to be heard. After leaving behind the towering megaliths, the next mystery greets you with an almost musical presence. It is not obvious at first. The structures appear silent, still, and unmoving. Monuments carved from solid rock or assembled with impossible precision. Yet when you stand within them, something unexpected happens. A whisper becomes an echo. A footstep becomes a deep, resonant hum. A single soft sound blooms into vibration, as though the walls themselves are alive. This is where history begins to blur into something more enigmatic. These ancient builders were not just working with stone. They were working with acoustics, shaping chambers that respond to sound in ways modern architects struggle to replicate, even with advanced tools. It feels as if they understood resonance with a level of intimacy that transcended the basic physics we learn today. They knew how sound travels through stone, how frequencies behave within enclosed spaces, and how vibration can transform ordinary moments into experiences that feel sacred, ethereal, and strangely otherworldly. Standing inside these chambers, you become aware of the space around you in a different way. Every breath feels amplified. Every subtle movement carries a tone. You hear your own presence reflected back at you, softened yet magnified, like being inside a vast musical instrument crafted from the bones of the earth. It is a sensation both grounding and surreal, as if you've stepped into a forgotten technology, not one powered by machines or wires, but by harmony, geometry, and human intuition. Many of these structures share a curious feature. They amplify specific frequencies. Not all sounds, only certain notes, certain tones, certain vibrations. Speak at one pitch, and the chamber responds instantly, sending a wave of resonance through the air that you can feel in your chest. Speak at another, and the room falls silent. Such selective acoustics are not the result of chance. They require knowledge of shape, angle, and material. They require an understanding of echoes and wave behavior long before the science of acoustics was documented. It becomes difficult to imagine how ancient builders discovered this. Did they experiment for generations? Did they possess oral traditions of knowledge now lost to time? Or did they intuitively understand something about the relationship between sound and structure that we have yet to fully rediscover? In the dim light, your mind begins to wander. You imagine ancient priests, shamans, or astronomer builders standing within these resonant halls, their voices merging with the architecture and ceremonial events that have left no written record. Perhaps these spaces were designed to alter consciousness through sound. Perhaps the vibrations were meant to align with the rhythm of the human body, creating a shared emotional experience. Or perhaps they serve a practical purpose, signaling, communication, or even synchronization of large groups. The idea that ancient people were deeply aware of sound's power feels strangely comforting. Sound is primal, universal. Long before tools or scripts or machines, humans had their voices. Perhaps these resonant chambers amplified not just sound, but connection between people, between communities, between the living world and the unseen. As you move through the space, its acoustic effect shifts with every step. In one corner, a whisper grows into a lingering echo. In another, the sound dissolves instantly. The floor and walls seem to guide the vibrations like invisible currents. It is easy to believe this was intentional, a form of ancient craftsmanship that combines science, art, and spirituality into a single design. The deeper you reflect on this, the more the mystery expands. How did multiple ancient cultures, from distant continents with no known contact, create structures with similar acoustic anomalies? How did they all discover ways to shape stone so that sound behaves in patterns eerily alike? These places form yet another hidden thread connecting the ancient world, one woven not through visual similarity, but through sonic architecture. Perhaps it was a shared instinct. Perhaps it was a universal fascination with the way sound interacts with space. Or perhaps there is something else, something deeper that early humans perceived, which we have forgotten in the noise of the modern world. A sensitivity to the resonance of the earth. A harmony that fades when everything becomes loud. You pause in the middle of the chamber, letting the silence wrap around you. Then, gently, you exhale a single breath. The room responds with a soft vibration, almost like a sigh. The space feels alive, not in a literal sense, but in a way that reminds you that architecture can shape experience, that stone can carry memory, and that the past is not entirely silent. As you step out into the open air, the world suddenly feels quieter. The sky stretches wide above you. The land spreads out peacefully, and the echoing hum fades into stillness. Yet something of that resonance remains inside you, a gentle awareness that history is layered not only in stone, but in sound. The journey now begins to shift once more, guiding you toward a new mystery, one carved high in the mountainsides, where ancient cliffs bear enormous faces, symbols, and structures shaped with precision so perfect it challenges every assumption. A place where artistry, geometry, and scale collide once again in ways that should not have been possible. A place waiting patiently in the mountains, ready to reveal the next impossible chapter. High in the mountains, where the air grows thin and the world below fades into distant valleys, another ancient mystery waits in quiet stillness. The journey upward feels almost ceremonial. With each step, the landscape grows sharper, the wind cooler, and the silence deeper. It is the kind of silence that seems to hold its breath, anticipating something extraordinary carved into the very bones of the cliffs. And then, as the path bends around a final ridge, you see it. Colossal faces, precise geometric shapes, and impossibly smooth surfaces cut directly into the mountain itself. These carvings do not feel accidental. They do not resemble crude attempts or primitive art. They are deliberate, symmetrical, purposeful. Some of the surfaces look as though machines passed over them. Machines, we are told, did not exist in ancient times. The angles are so straight, the lines so measured, that you find yourself questioning what kind of tools could have crafted such perfection at this altitude. The structures blend seamlessly with the mountain, as if nature and human skill merged into a single, elegant vision. Standing before these faces and geometric forms, you feel their presence. Not alive, yet undeniably expressive. Their eyes seem to look beyond you, focusing instead on an ancient horizon only they remember. Perhaps they once represented guardians, ancestors, or deities. Or perhaps they were markers, signals carved for travelers who long ago walked these high paths. Whatever their purpose, they radiate a sense of quiet authority, as though whispering tales of civilizations far older and more sophisticated than recorded history suggests. The surfaces of these carvings tell their own story. Some areas are polished smooth with a precision that defies chisel and hammer. Others are intricately textured with patterns too uniform to be created freehand. You can almost imagine craftsmen standing on precarious ledges, shaping the mountain with unwavering skill, guided by knowledge we have lost. And then another thought rises. Perhaps the shaping was done not by people clinging to cliffs, but by a method that allowed them to cut stone as easily as carving into soft wood. The air grows cooler as shadows lengthen across the cliff face. Every contour becomes more defined, more striking. This place feels like a gallery suspended above the world, an open-air museum built long before the idea of museums existed. The scale is overwhelming. These carvings were not meant to impress a small audience. They were meant to be eternal, to withstand wind, weather, and time. And they have succeeded. Thousands of years later, they still command the landscape with effortless dominance. What makes these carvings even more mysterious is how they align with other ancient sites scattered around the world. The precision mirrors the stonework of far-off regions. The geometric shapes resemble patterns seen in civilizations that, according to the conventional timeline, had no contact with each other. This shared language of straight lines, perfect angles, and monumental artistry forms another invisible thread weaving across continents. A thread connecting cultures through a knowledge we can no longer fully trace. You begin to wonder who these mountain builders truly were. Were they artists? Engineers? Astronomers? Their carvings seem to interact with sunlight in specific ways, casting shadows that shift meaningfully as the day progresses. Some faces glow with morning light. Others become dramatic silhouettes at dusk. The geometry lines up with ridges, valleys, or perhaps even celestial events. The mountain itself becomes a part of the artwork, as though the builders chose this place not only for its stone, but for its relationship with the sky. As you observe the carvings in the fading light, the atmosphere grows tranquil, almost dreamlike. The breeze carries a faint echo of centuries slipping by, a reminder that time moves differently among mountains. Civilizations rise and fall in the valleys below, but the peaks remain unchanged. Perhaps that is why ancient people chose to carve their messages here, in places untouched by the shifting sands of fate, where their work could endure long after their voices were silenced. You gently place your hand on the cool stone surface. The mountain feels steady, grounded, eternal. Whatever shaped it, whether ancient ingenuity, forgotten technology, or something even more mysterious, left a legacy that outlives all explanations. These carvings are not merely artifacts. They are echoes of a forgotten relationship between humans and the natural world. A relationship built on respect, understanding, and a desire to leave something meaningful behind. As the last rays of sunlight slip behind the peaks, the mountain grows quiet once more. The faces fade into silhouette, their expressions now softened by dusk. The path downward awaits, but you leave with a lingering sense of awe. Another mystery has been unveiled, yet unanswered. Another puzzle added to the tapestry of ancient wonders. And as the darkness gently settles over the cliffs, the journey prepares to move toward another enigma, one buried deep underground, where labyrinths and tunnels stretch into the earth like veins of forgotten knowledge. A place where ancient engineers shaped entire worlds beneath our feet, leaving behind networks so intricate they challenge the boundaries of what we believe early civilizations could achieve. Beneath the Earth's surface lies a realm that feels entirely separate from the world above, a place shaped not by sunlight and wind, but by hands that understood shadows, stone, and silence. As you descend into the underground passage, the air grows cooler, heavier, and more ancient. The echoes of your footsteps vanish quickly, as though swallowed by an immense and invisible presence. You reach a point where the walls narrow, then widen suddenly into a vast corridor carved out with uncanny precision. This is where the story begins, deep beneath the ground, where light rarely enters, yet knowledge seems to flourish. The tunnels stretch in every direction, weaving through the earth like an intricate nervous system of an extinct civilization. The sheer scale is overwhelming. Some passages extend for kilometers, perfectly straight, without the slightest deviation. Others curve gently, as though designed with mathematical intent. This is not the random tunneling of miners or simple shelters. It is architecture, intentional, planned, mapped long before the first stone was cut. The walls themselves reveal astonishing craftsmanship. They bear signs of smooth finishing, as if shaped by tools capable of cutting through solid rock with effortless grace. There are no chisel marks, no uneven edges, no crude surfaces. Instead, the stone feels almost polished, like the interior of a temple rather than a subterranean tunnel. In places, geometric symbols line the walls, intersecting circles, spirals, and angular forms that seem to repeat in a pattern too consistent to be accidental. Some symbols appear to represent directions or measurements, hinting at a forgotten system of navigation once used by those who built these pathways. Moving deeper, the tunnels branch into chambers, large, dome-shaped rooms supported by pillars carved from single blocks of stone. Each pillar is decorated with curves and lines that appear ornamental, but might also contain encoded meanings. The chambers vary in size, some intimate and quiet, others vast enough that your voice disappears into the darkness before returning. It becomes clear that these underground structures were built with purpose. They were not random shelters or emergency hideouts. They form a cohesive network, as though the builders intended to create an entire world beneath the earth. Ventilation shafts appear in intervals, cleverly hidden within the folds of the stone. Even thousands of years later, a faint breath of air circulates through them, proving the ingenuity of the builders. They understood airflow, pressure, structural stability, knowledge that modern engineers still find impressive when looking at ancient sites. Water channels run along certain corridors, guiding streams into reservoirs carved deep into the earth. Everything is interconnected, as though the planners had anticipated every need: light, air, water, movement, and shelter. One chamber stands out among the rest. Its ceiling is shaped into a perfect dome, smooth and symmetrical, with a series of holes arranged in a precise pattern. When a torch is lit, the light flickers through these openings, projecting shapes onto the surrounding walls. The shifting shadows form constellations, star maps that mirror the sky above. This discovery suggests that the underground architects were not merely builders, but astronomers, mathematicians, perhaps even philosophers who sought refuge below, while still keeping the heavens in their designs. The deeper you go, the more the tunnels resemble a labyrinth. But even within the complexity, there is structure. Every corridor seems to lead to another purposeful space: storage halls, workshops, living quarters, ceremonial rooms, and places that feel like meeting chambers where leaders or scholars may once have gathered. Nothing suggests chaos. Everything reflects order. The possibility arises that these tunnels were not merely shelters, but entire underground cities, capable of housing thousands of people. The builders might have lived lives entirely beneath the surface, protected from wars, climate shifts, or celestial events. Their society could have flourished here, hidden from the world above, guided by knowledge passed down through generations. And yet, at some point, they vanished, leaving behind only the bones of their underground masterpiece. Even now, the silence of the tunnels feels alive. You imagine the flicker of ancient lamps, the murmur of voices, the sound of footsteps moving through the corridors. You imagine the way wisdom must have flowed through these halls, how innovations were shared, how children might have played beneath the carved domes, and how leaders may have stood in the largest chamber, addressing their people in a world without sun. At last, after exploring countless pathways, you reach a final descent. The steps lead to a chamber filled with carvings that differ from all the others. These carvings are more expressive, almost emotional. Faces, hands, scenes of people working, resting, teaching, and creating. It feels like a farewell message, a final record of who they were. The figures appear hopeful, united, focused on something beyond survival. Perhaps they believe their knowledge would someday be rediscovered. Perhaps they carve these scenes as a bridge to future generations, trusting that their work beneath the earth would not be forgotten. As you rise back toward the world above, a feeling lingers, a mixture of awe, humility, and curiosity. What drove these ancient people to carve such an enormous world beneath the surface? What did they fear? What did they hope for? What did they envision? The answers remain hidden, yet the tunnels speak in their own way. They whisper of intelligence, creativity, organization, and an unbreakable desire to leave behind something enduring. There comes a point where the trail of mysteries leads not outward, but upward, to the sky, where the oldest stories were written not on parchment or stone, but on the night itself. For ancient civilizations around the world, the sky was both a map and a myth, a guide that shaped their calendars, their rituals, and their understanding of life's deeper rhythms. And yet, scattered across the world are monuments whose alignments with celestial events are so precise, so mathematically flawless, that they challenge the very limits of what we assume these early societies could know. It is here, in the dance between Earth and stars, that some of the most mind-bending mysteries wait quietly to be understood. Imagine standing before a circle of megaliths, carved and lifted into impossible balance. At first glance, the stones seem random, their arrangement almost playful, as though they were placed simply to claim territory or honor a deity. But when the first light of dawn on a solstice morning spills across their surfaces, the truth emerges. One ray passes perfectly through a narrow gap, illuminating the center stone with uncanny accuracy. This is no coincidence. Its precision rivals the calibrations of modern observatories. It suggests an ancient awareness of the sky that feels too advanced, too refined, for a world supposedly bound by primitive tools. These structures are not isolated anomalies. They appear across continents, each honoring the heavens in a different way. Some align with equinoxes, casting shadows that crawl along carved lines like living calendars. Others mark the extreme points of the moon's orbit, a cycle so long and subtle that it takes nearly 2 decades to observe fully. The fact that ancient builders recognized and recorded such patterns raises a tantalizing question. How many generations dedicated their lives to watching the sky, passing knowledge from elder to apprentice in a chain that spans centuries? Yet the deeper mystery lies not simply in the observation of celestial events, but in the architecture used to capture them. Consider the stone corridors designed to frame specific stars as they rise and set, or the underground chambers with shafts angled perfectly toward the sun during only one moment of the year. These were not casual constructions. They were the result of meticulous planning, mathematical understanding, and a cultural devotion to the cosmos. Each structure becomes a frozen moment of astronomical mastery, carved into the earth with a clarity that modern astronomers still find astonishing. But for all the sharp precision, there's also a sense of the unknown woven through these ancient skywatching sites. Why did these civilizations invest so much effort into aligning stone with star? Was it simply to follow seasons, to measure time, to track harvest cycles? Or does the devotion point towards something more profound, a belief that the sky held messages, warnings, or truths beyond the physical world? Many ancient cultures believed that the movement of celestial bodies influenced human fate, that life on Earth reflected the heavens in ways both symbolic and literal. Their monuments might have been bridges between realms, designed not just to observe the cosmos, but to participate in it. Walking through one such site at dusk, the atmosphere feels almost enchanted. As the sky shifts from gold to deep blue, stars blink awake above you. Their patterns soften into familiar shapes: the hunter, the serpent, the swan, figures that ancient stargazers knew intimately. You imagine them standing where you stand, charting the slow dance of starlight across centuries. Their understanding was not driven by technology, but by the simple act of watching night after night, guided by instinct, patience, and wonder. And somehow, their observations became architecture: stone, shadow, and starlight woven together into a single, silent story. Some researchers propose that ancient people might have possessed a worldview so different from ours that it cannot be neatly translated into modern scientific language. They may have seen no distinction between the spiritual and the astronomical, between myth and measurement. To them, aligning a temple with a star was not merely an engineering achievement. It was an act of harmony, a way to place human life within the great cosmic tapestry. The lines they carved on stone became lines connecting Earth to sky, humanity to infinity. Others suggest that such precision indicates a lost scientific tradition, a body of knowledge forgotten or erased through time. Perhaps generations observed the sky so carefully that they developed advanced mathematical techniques long before they were documented. Perhaps their wisdom was transmitted through oral tradition that eventually faded, leaving only the physical monuments as clues. As the night deepens, the stars shift imperceptibly overhead. The sight grows quiet, and the stones seem to breathe in the cool air. You begin to understand the power these structures once held, the way they transformed the night sky into a living calendar, a guiding teacher, a silent companion for those who sought meaning in its depths. These ancient alignments remind us that humanity has always looked upward, searching for patterns, seeking answers that lie beyond reach yet remain eternally visible. The transition from earthbound mysteries to celestial ones feels natural, as though each ancient monument was part of a larger narrative, one written in stone, the other in starlight. And together, they invite us to reconsider the intelligence and intention of those who came long before us, people who may have known far more about the rhythm of the universe than history dares to admit. There comes a moment, after exploring the heavens and the underground worlds, when the journey turns toward landscapes shaped not by human hands, but by forces far older and far more mysterious. These are places where nature itself behaves in ways that seem almost deliberate, where stone bends, water dances, and gravity appears to falter. They're the quiet corners of the earth where everything feels slightly out of place, where the familiar rules of reality soften just enough to leave you wondering whether the world is stranger than we realize. Imagine walking into a valley where the ground tilts at an angle that confuses your senses. You drop a small stone and expect it to roll one way, but instead, it rolls uphill, defying logic as though pulled by an invisible thread. The air feels different here, heavier, yet oddly still. Birds fly overhead, but their calls seem muted, distant, swallowed by the landscape. People who visit such places often describe a sensation of being watched, though there is no one else around. It is not fear exactly, but a heightened awareness, as though the earth itself is paying attention. These anomalies appear in many regions. Forests where trees grow in unnatural spirals, cliffs that resonate with deep, vibrating tones when touched, lakes that never freeze despite frigid winters, and fields where compasses spin endlessly without settling. Scientists propose explanations: magnetic fields, mineral deposits, optical illusions. But the locals tell older stories, stories woven from centuries of observation and intuition. They speak of ancient spirits, hidden forces, and forgotten events buried beneath the soil. And sometimes, their tales feel more fitting than any technical description. In certain deserts, circular formations appear overnight, perfectly symmetrical rings etched into the sand, untouched by footsteps or wind. They vanish just as mysteriously, leaving behind no trace of how they were formed. In remote mountain ranges, massive boulders balance atop thin spires of rock, defying gravity with an elegance that feels intentional. Some are so delicately perched that a strong breeze could topple them, yet they have remained standing for thousands of years. The landscape seems to whisper that it holds memories older than humanity, secrets preserved in stone and silence. There are also regions where strange lights flicker across the sky without sound, glowing orbs that drift peacefully above treetops before disappearing as quickly as they arrived. Travelers once believed these lights to be spirits or guardians of the wilderness. Modern observers call them atmospheric phenomena or electrical discharges. But no explanation fully matches the experience of standing beneath them, watching their gentle movement, feeling the air hum softly as though reacting to their presence. One of the most unsettling anomalies appears in deep caverns where sound behaves differently. Echoes linger too long or fail to return at all. Your voice does not travel the way it should. Sometimes even the rhythmic drip of water seems out of sync, echoing at odd intervals, as though time itself wavers in the darkness. These caves often contain markings, lines carved into walls, patterns etched into stone floors, suggesting that ancient people once visited them too. Did they hear the same distortions, feel the same disorientation? And did they leave these markings as warnings or as testimonies of something they could not explain? In vast, open plains, patches of land remain mysteriously barren. Grass grows everywhere except in perfectly shaped circles where the soil appears untouched yet lifeless. Some are small, others large enough to be seen from the sky. Locals insist these circles are portals or scars left by celestial visitors, while scientists investigate fungi, termites, or chemical imbalances. Yet the true cause remains elusive. The Earth, it seems, is capable of creating designs with precision rivaling human geometry. As you explore these places, uncertainty becomes a companion. The line between natural phenomena and the supernatural blurs, not through fear, but through the realization that nature holds far more intelligence and complexity than we often acknowledge. Perhaps these landscapes are reminders that the earth itself is alive, an ancient teacher whose lessons are expressed not in words, but in quiet peculiarities that invite humility and wonder. And while each anomaly can be analyzed, measured, or dismissed, the emotional impact remains. A sense of stepping into a world slightly shifted from the one you know, where the familiar laws of reality stretch just enough to make you question what else might lie hidden. These places become thresholds, inviting us to look more closely, to listen more carefully, and to accept that mystery is not always a sign of the unknown. It is often a sign that we have not yet learned how to see. There are moments in the study of ancient mysteries when the journey shifts from examining physical structures and natural anomalies to confronting something more elusive, those strange intersections where myth, memory, and material evidence blend so seamlessly that it becomes impossible to tell where truth ends and imagination begins. These are the legends that refuse to die, the stories preserved not only in old manuscripts or whisper traditions, but occasionally in artifacts and ruins that hint that maybe, just maybe, the most unbelievable tales hold fragments of something real. This is where ancient folklore transforms from simple storytelling into a puzzle that challenges everything we think we know about the past. Across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, similar stories emerge. Tales of visitors from distant realms, luminous beings descending from the sky, colossal creatures walking the earth, and civilizations rising to astonishing heights before being swallowed by catastrophe. The parallels are striking, so consistent that they create a quiet tension. Is this shared imagination or a forgotten memory echoing across humanity's collective consciousness? Imagine sitting beside an elder in a remote village, listening to a tale passed down through dozens of generations. The elder speaks of a time when the land was different, when the sky glowed with colors that no longer appear, and when powerful beings, half human, half something else, taught early people how to farm, build, heal, and navigate the stars. At first glance, it feels like mythology in its purest form. But then you remember that similar accounts exist on every continent, from civilizations that supposedly never had contact with one another. Stories of culture bringers, sky people, shining ones, watchers, giants, teachers from the heavens. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Apkallu were said to have emerged from the sea, bringing wisdom and shaping the foundations of early civilization. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl was described as a feathered serpent deity who taught knowledge, agriculture, and astronomy. In Polynesia, the Menehune were small, mysterious builders who created engineering marvels overnight. The Dogon people of Mali speak of visitors who came from a star system invisible to the naked eye, teaching the tribe advanced astronomical details that modern science only verified recently. Even in Norse tradition, the gods themselves were described as travelers who arrived from distant realms, gifting knowledge before departing. These patterns hint at something deeper than simple storytelling. Whether symbolic or literal, these accounts reveal that early societies believed they were guided by forces beyond themselves, forces that shaped their architecture, their calendars, their rituals, and their understanding of the cosmos. And sometimes, buried beneath those stories, physical evidence appears that aligns with the myth in ways too precise to ignore. Consider the recurring tales of giants. From the towering Nephilim in ancient Hebrew texts to the Jotnar of Scandinavia, the Titans of Greece, and the colossal beings described in Native American legends, giant-like figures appear everywhere. While most historians classify them as metaphorical or symbolic, occasional findings complicate the interpretation. Oversized tools, massive sarcophagi, and skeletal remains that defy normal proportions whispered about in old archaeological accounts. Though many such discoveries are disputed or lost, the persistent references across unrelated civilizations create an atmosphere of lingering uncertainty. Perhaps these stories are exaggerations of real individuals, or perhaps they reflect a deeper cultural memory etched into human tradition. Then there are the great floods, the event so universally embedded in myth that it almost feels like a global scar. Whether it is the flood of Gilgamesh, the sinking of Atlantis, the deluge of Manu in India, or the story of Niue in Hawaii, nearly every ancient culture speaks of a catastrophe that reshaped the world. For centuries, scholars treated these stories as symbolic tales of rebirth. But geological evidence shows that at the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose dramatically, swallowing coastal settlements worldwide. Massive meltwater pulses reshaped continents. Entire ecosystems vanished. Perhaps these myths are not metaphors at all, but a collective remembrance of real disasters witnessed by ancestors trying to make sense of unimaginable change. But beyond giants and floods, there is something even more mysterious woven into these ancient traditions. The recurring motif of lost civilizations, societies described as extraordinarily advanced, spiritually elevated, or technologically sophisticated, yet long vanished without leaving a complete trace. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, and other legendary cultures are often dismissed outright, yet evidence of unexpectedly advanced knowledge appears in places where it shouldn't exist. The precision of ancient calendars aligned perfectly with astronomical cycles. Complex mathematical systems embedded in monuments whose creators supposedly lacked writing systems. Cities built with engineering techniques so precise that modern tools struggle to replicate them. Legends that speak of technologies capable of controlling weather, healing with vibrations, or harnessing the energy of stones and water. While these stories might seem fantastical, they compel a deeper look when considered alongside the physical ruins left behind. Some indigenous groups insist that their ancestors did not invent certain technologies, they received them. They claim that knowledge arrived fully formed, mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, not through slow evolution, but through pivotal moments of teaching. It is tempting to dismiss such claims as poetic embellishment. Yet when the physical evidence supports the sudden appearance of sophisticated understanding, the line between folklore and factual history blurs. And then there are the carvings, ancient depictions that defy easy explanation. Figures wearing uniforms that resemble modern suits or helmets. Objects shaped like aircraft or rockets. Scenes that appear to show flight, navigation, or advanced instruments. While interpretations vary wildly and skepticism is always warranted, one cannot deny that some imagery seems unnervingly ahead of its time, as though the artist tried to record something that did not fit within the world they knew. But it is not only artifacts that deepen the mystery. It is the consistency of themes across the globe. So many cultures speak of cycles of rise and fall, of civilizations destroyed and reborn, of knowledge gained and lost, of teachers descending from distant realms to guide humanity during pivotal transitions. Whether these stories refer to metaphysical forces, natural events, or literal visitors, they reflect an ancient worldview in which humanity was part of a larger tapestry of beings and cosmic cycles. Even more intriguing is the recurring idea that knowledge itself is sacred, something to be protected, hidden, or encoded within myth until the time is right for it to be understood. Ancient texts often describe the deliberate guarding of wisdom, passed through chosen individuals, preserved in rituals, or locked within symbolic language. Perhaps they believed that power had to be balanced with readiness, that insight required responsibility, and that understanding the deeper laws of the universe was a privilege, not a guarantee. Walking through these ancient narratives, you begin to feel the interconnectedness of everything. The monuments, the myths, the strange anomalies, the lost knowledge, the celestial alignments. It's as if humanity once lived closer to the mysteries that now seem distant and fragmented. Over time, knowledge eroded, stories blurred, and memories took the shape of legends. But the remnants remain, waiting for curious minds to piece them together. And yet, the deeper you go into these myths, the more you realize that perhaps their greatest purpose was never to provide literal explanations, but to point towards something profound. The idea that the world is layered, that wisdom comes in cycles, that humanity has experienced more than history records, and that the line between myth and memory is thinner than we allow ourselves to believe. These ancient legends invite us not to accept every mystery as fact, but to question the boundaries we place around what is possible. They remind us that the past was not empty. It was vibrant, complex, filled with people who looked at the world with a depth of wonder we often forget. And maybe, hidden in their stories, there's an invitation to rediscover a way of seeing that blends curiosity with humility, science with imagination, the known with the deeply unknown. There comes a time in every exploration of ancient mysteries when the focus shifts from what happened in the distant past to how those echoes still reach us, shaping modern curiosity in ways we rarely acknowledge. All the strange ruins, the celestial alignments, the carved symbols, the forgotten legends. none exist only as artifacts of history. They continue to ripple through the human imagination, influencing the stories we tell, the inventions we chase, and the questions we ask about our place in the world. In this way, the mysteries of antiquity do not remain locked behind museum glass. They breathe quietly in the background of our modern lives. As technology advances and science sharpens the boundaries of what we understand, something unexpected has happened. Instead of explaining away the mysteries, it has illuminated them more vividly. High-resolution satellite imagery reveals geometric shapes and buried structures hidden beneath deserts and jungles. Ground-penetrating radar exposes entire ancient cities resting beneath modern ones. DNA studies uncover migration patterns that match long-forgotten oral histories. And mathematical analysis brings new meaning to ancient patterns and symbols once dismissed as decorative art. With every new discovery, the past feels less distant, less primitive, more deliberate than we ever allowed ourselves to consider. What makes all of this even more compelling is how these ancient mysteries resonate with modern dreams and fears. For example, the idea of lost civilizations has seeped into futuristic architecture, renewable energy design, and even space exploration concepts. Engineers study ancient aqueducts that functioned flawlessly for centuries. Architects analyze the thermal efficiency of mud-brick cities. Even astronomers revisit ancient star maps to understand cyclical patterns recorded long before telescopes existed. It becomes clear that modern innovation often grows not only from the present, but also from the wisdom preserved in antiquity. Yet the influence runs deeper than practical design. It touches the imagination. Consider how often modern art, literature, and film borrow from ancient symbols. The spiral that appears in prehistoric carvings shows up in contemporary science fiction as a metaphor for infinity. The concept of watchers, guardians, or ancient sky beings inspires stories that explore humanity's relationship with the unknown. The idea of cyclical destruction and rebirth feeds narratives about resilience, transformation, and hope. Even in scientific thought, ancient frameworks echo quietly. When astrophysicists discuss multiverses or cosmic cycles, they unknowingly mirror ideas embedded in Vedic texts. When geologists speak of catastrophic shifts or rapid climate events, they echo the Great Flood myths told by nearly every ancestral culture. The threads of the past, whether intentionally or subconsciously, weave their way into modern interpretation. In this light, ancient mysteries become something more than puzzles. They become mirrors reflecting our own questions, insecurities, and aspirations. When we ask how ancient people built structures with such precision, we are really asking whether human potential is far greater than we assume. When we marvel at ancient astronomical knowledge, we confront our desire to understand our place in the universe. And when we ponder myths of civilizations rising and falling, we are forced to confront our own fragility, wondering whether our age of technology is more secure or more vulnerable than theirs. But perhaps the most profound connection between ancient mysteries and modern curiosity lies in the human need for wonder. In a world where answers are always a click away and information flows faster than thought, the unknown becomes precious. It becomes a rare reminder that the world is deeper, older, and more complex than our daily routines allow us to see. Ancient mysteries create space for humility, offering a gentle reminder that progress does not mean omniscience, and that wisdom does not always move in a straight line. Think of the emotional experience of standing before an ancient structure, perhaps a towering monolith or a temple carved into stone. You feel the quiet weight of time pressing around you. You imagine the hands that shaped those stones, the minds that planned their placement, the eyes that watched the stars and recorded their rhythms with meticulous devotion. You begin to sense that these people were not so different from us. They wondered about existence. They sought meaning in patterns. They built things to last, hoping their knowledge would survive long after they were gone. And somehow, across thousands of years, their creations still speak to us. This bridge between past and present becomes even stronger when new discoveries emerge. A previously unknown chamber beneath a famous pyramid. Clay tablets revealing stories earlier than any written text. Giant geoglyphs rediscovered through drones. Underwater ruins that challenge established timelines. Each revelation sparks waves of excitement, not only among scholars, but among ordinary people who feel a kind of personal connection to the unfolding narrative of human history. There is something deeply comforting in the idea that the world still holds secrets. It means we haven't reached the end of exploration. It means there are still things left to learn, questions to ask, mysteries to embrace. In an era where digital technologies map nearly every corner of the globe, ancient mysteries remind us that understanding is not only about gathering data, but about interpreting meaning, about listening to the silence between facts. Modern life often encourages speed, efficiency, and clarity. Ancient mysteries encourage the opposite: patience, contemplation, and acceptance of ambiguity. They soften the harshness of certainty, offering instead a poetic perspective, one where questions are valued as much as answers, and where mystery becomes part of what makes existence beautiful. And as you consider the influence of these mysteries on modern thought, it becomes clear that they shape not only our intellectual pursuits, but our emotional landscapes. They inspire awe. They spark imagination. They give us stories that transcend time, connecting us to ancestors we will never meet, but whose curiosity echoes ours in every century. Through them, we find comfort in continuity, the sense that humanity has always searched, always questioned, always reached beyond the horizon. In this way, ancient mysteries become a shared inheritance, not artifacts on display, but living ideas passed between generations. They remind us that the past is not a closed chapter, but an ongoing dialogue. And through that dialogue, we are invited to see the world not as a solved problem, but as an unfolding story rich with hidden layers waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look deeper.